ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips calls out his conference that they need to improve, and one team that better be listening is Boston College.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you want the news, analysis, and scoops on your Boston College Eagles, you are in the right place. We are a daily free Boston College podcast with 5 episodes a week available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. On Tuesday, the ACC begins their ACC media kickoff. This is the grand kickoff for the ACC football season. There's no games, but we get the commissioner, we have the teams, the players. It's really the start of the march towards the 2025 season. And to kick it all off, we had Jim Phillips. And what did he talk about? We're going to talk about 3 different things. We're going to talk about, he calls out some teams, the conference itself, that they need to improve, and how I think this is a direct point to a team like BC and how they need to improve. 2 new initiatives that ACC is going to use that are going to change how you view the conference. And one team that's out there trying to get into a Power 4 conference, do they make sense for the ACC? We'll talk about it on today's show. Now, the ACC Media Days. Jim Phillips, he has his opening remarks. And I said on yesterday's show, it was a big one for him. And I thought he, of all people, is the most interesting person during this week because it's more general, big college football discussions that have impacts on every team. It's not just the rah-rah, our team's going to be good stuff that you hear from the coaches and players. This is about the health and future of a conference that's in trouble. And on Tuesday, I thought Jim Phillips brought up some great points. First of all, he brought up the money that they're putting out. They averaged $47 million per school over this the 2023-24 season, the most in conference history. So they're getting better, and it's improving. I think it was like 56% in a span of a couple years. So that piece is feeling good. But the piece I want to bring up, this is a Boston College podcast. If you want the conference itself, go to Locked On ACC. Was he talked about the uneven distribution of money. And that means there's the WINS initiative, there's the eyeball or TV initiative or exposure initiative. I think it's called exposure initiative. That's going to give more money to the Clemsons, the Florida States, the Miamis, UNCs. And we all knew about these. But there were a few things he mentioned that I thought really kind of pinpointed that Boston College is really falling farther behind and they got to get their acting gear. And this is the perfect time to do them, and I'll explain why. He talked about, first of all, that the Bulls last year were a complete disaster for the ACC. They won 2 games and they lost everything else. I think they were 2-11, 2-9, something like that. Bad. They got to the playoffs, they all got smoked. They got to the Bulls, they all lost. So the ACC did not look good, and this is a big moment where they got to really show that they're as good as the Big Ten and the SEC. They didn't do that last year. They got to get better at that. But he also talked about the uneven distribution of money and said that, the schools that are willing to spend are going to get paid better. Well, what school do I cover that doesn't show the willingness to spend? Boston College. They are doing better, at football at least, in spending. But elsewhere, I mean, even at football, compare their spending levels to most of the top-tier programs in the ACC. It's not even close. Whether it's Miami, Florida State, Clemson, some of these bigger programs that have more money. UNC, I mean, they just spent how much to get Bill Belichick here? Excuse me. The BC is at a crux here, and he said that there's teams that are willing to spend are going to get better compensated. BC needs to be a team like that, and I'm not expecting them to spend like Clemson and Florida State, but they need to get their money up more if they want to be seen as a legitimate Power 4 program. You go on social media, and BC is always a joke. Everyone just puts them at the bottom. The Athletic, even though they don't even have their financial statements because they're a private institution, put them 64th of 68 in terms of evaluate money, how much they're worth. Even though BC has never released any of that info, so I don't know how they just throw them down there. But what I'm saying now is we've heard this before. This is not new. If you're a Boston College fan, if you're an alumni, you have heard all about how BC doesn't spend money. It's changing right now. They're doing a better job with Bill O'Brien, his staffing, the Friends of the Heights, the NIL arm of the athletic department. They're doing a better job, but they're still lagging behind. And I honestly do believe that there's a chance that this will change in the next in about a year. And that change will be Father Jack Butler. His vision of where athletics is going to be very critical about how BC continues to survive or struggles in the ACC. If Father Jack Butler really cares about winning, which I've heard that's what he thinks, he cannot honestly look at the position BC football was put in and say, yeah, they're winning. They're not. For 15 plus years, we're going on 17 now since they made the ACC championship. They have been a middle of the road program. Winning does not mean having a one game over 500 record. That is not what BC is doing. And that is what Jim Phillips is referring to. If Father Jack wants to spend more money to boost up how much athletes are getting paid, boost up as much as they can within the program, getting exposure, spending more on your coaching staff, that will change that. And then BC will win. And hey, you put in money, you make money. That's how this works. So I think what Jim Phillips is saying is something that hopefully Father Jack, who's about to jump into this new role, is hearing and saying, we have an untapped potential here at BC. We are not going to be Clemson. We are not going to be Florida State with the amount of money that we're putting in. But there's plenty of other smaller schools out there that are doing what we can do and to make ourselves competitive. So my hope is that, this is my hope from what happened on Tuesday, is that Jim Phillips was talking and somewhere in Chestnut Hill in one of the monasteries, Father Jack Butler was listening to this and saying, yes, I get you. We're going to change. That's my hope. And maybe I'm all flower and roses and really optimistic about things, but I do think that this is a critical moment for BC because it's where the college football landscape is all changing. And this is a chance for Boston College to not get left behind and to hopefully jump ahead again. They can do it. It's not too late. So that when they're giving out this money, BC can be part of that and put that money back into our program and make BC exciting, make BC a winning team. I feel like I'm eating crazy pills here, but it's possible. This is their chance. Father Jack, hopefully he heard that. In a moment, there were two initiatives that Jim Phillips brought up that I thought were really critical and interesting to talk about and how they impact Boston College. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. Have you ever decided that at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time is so easy to use. It's an app you download to your phone. With prices on the app actually dropping the closer you get to first pitch, you will get to your game with last-minute deals, clear CVUs, and a lowest price guarantee. I've used it multiple times for football games and baseball games, and it's worked every time. I've taken large groups and been able to find large bulk groups of seating at reasonable prices, and without the with their all-in prices, you don't have those crazy fees added on at the end. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, and the host of this great podcast. If you are not an everydayer, you should be. We're 5 days a week. I'm telling you, with the season not in yet, you can go back and check out some of our great shows from the last week, talking about recruiting, talking about the upcoming season, talking about all the news and latest things going on with Boston College that maybe you've missed out on. Go back to our archive, check them all out. Become an everydayer. Listen to all 5 episodes all week long. Now, Jim Phillips had, a lot to talk about. He was on stage for almost an hour. And he had 2 new initiatives that I thought were, new policies. I don't know if they call them initiatives, but policies that are going on in the ACC that I think are worth talking about. The first has to do with court and field storming, which is honestly a very divisive conversation. For some folks, they think that every field storming has to happen when it's only a major game and that they have to be ranked. For BC, all the people that hated it when they stormed against Missouri, when they stormed against Michigan State, I remember all of those conversations. People just got mad about it, and I never understood. But there's been some incidents that have happened in the last couple of years where people have stormed the field and either done something to an opposing player, bumped them, hit them, walked into them. It's been ugly. And so the ACC has now instituted a rule that there's fines imposed if opposing fan bases just storm the field right after a game. So that, the moment the clock hits 0, the fans storm the field, that's a fine. What they're hoping to say here is that storming the field is okay once the players of the opposition and the refs get off the field. And honestly, that seems like a good midpoint. It's not being so archaic that you're just putting an X marks on this and saying, no, you can't do that. But also understanding that, it's been kind of unsafe lately. Let's make it safer for everyone who's on the field, because that should be paramount. Now, the fun little caveat to all this is Clemson is somehow allowed to just storm the field whenever they want, at any time they want, which is kind of crazy because you should be able to allow their, I get it. It's their thing. I'm not saying that they shouldn't storm the field when they play Gardner Webb. That's whatever. That's what they want to do. That's their tradition. Fine. But if it's really about safety, why do they get a pass on that? It's safety. Like, if I drive my car with if my tradition is on Memorial Day, I drive my car 95 miles an hour, I shouldn't be allowed to just do that on Memorial Day because that's what I do. That doesn't make any sense. So that was one thing. Now, for me, I think this is interesting because, there's 3 marquee games at home this year. 4 if you want to call Georgia Tech one too, because I think that's a pretty big game. If BC wins any of those 4, I could see the fans storming the field. You beat Clemson, you're storming the field. You beat Notre Dame, you're storming the field. You beat SMU, probably, and Georgia Tech, maybe. You have to be careful now. If you are any of you folks out there are any of my everydayers are tailgaters, and I know some of you are because I've met you at your tailgates. You know how sensitive the security and police that are on hand can be at Boston College during a football game. I imagine, given this money piece, and it's a substantial amount. I think it's like $50,000 to $100,000, $200,000. BC does not want to give that up. They do not. I'm sure they don't want to give up that kind of money. So they're going to be giving their security very strict guidelines about this. They're going to have a plan in place. And those people are not going to mess around. So just be warned. Yes, it's going to be fun if you beat one of these teams, but don't do anything with those security guards because they're not going to mess around with you. And you don't need to get arrested. You don't need to get beaten up. You don't need any of that. Just wait. Just wait the 30 seconds it takes the other team to get off the field. I think that's the key, and I think it's fine. You can still have fun in the audience for 30 seconds before you charge the field. Seems pretty reasonable, right? The second initiative, and this is as a writer, I thought it was a big deal, but for fans, I could see this being huge too, is that availability reports are now going to be coming out for football, both basketball teams, and baseball. Hallelujah. As someone who's a beat writer who covers this team all the time, one of the most aggravating parts of this has been being completely left in the dark about injuries. You remember Thomas Castellanos for the WKU game last year. I knew nothing. They closed practice. O'Brien clearly wouldn't talk about it. And then we just had to guess for a week. And then who knows about it? Pete Thamel of ESPN, who, believe me, Pete Thamel does an amazing job. This is not a knock on Pete Thamel. I've always just found it kind of aggravating that as someone who covers the team, who is around that team all the time, I know nothing about it, and he's somehow the gatekeeper for every injury report for every team in the country. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. Now, you, me, are going to know about it by Thursday, and that's awesome. Now, this is great because the NFL does this, all sports have to do this, but college football has to do it now too. And this is not this was not done to help a writer or someone who covers the team or to make fans feel a little better. No. It's much more nefarious than that. This is done because of gambling. This is all because of gambling. When you have, odds, will Carson Beck play this first game? And, the odds are set on him and you don't know, and practices are closed. What happens? People who put good money on this are going to want to know, and they're going to try to find out. They're going to call teammates. They're going to call coaches. They're bugging. People are going to be bugged all the time about this kind of stuff. Now with availability reports, it gets them off their back. So that's the reason for all this. Because, you can't, if you're in Massachusetts, you can't bet on BC, but everywhere else you can. There's people out there that do this for a living that are putting big money on this. They're going to do that. So for you, no more Pete Thamel tweets of doom 2 hours, or it's usually 1 hour before a game where it's like 5 players that you just had no clue were hurt are actually hurt. Now we're going to know about it. Now we'll have, hey, for content creators, this is great. On Thursday, I'm going to know so I can talk about on Friday's show an injury that may impact the game. So for me, transparency is always key. I hate when everything is hidden. There's reasons for hiding things like, Bryce Steele had his health thing. That was always hidden. I get that. That's fine. But when a guy has, a strain in his knee and they just don't want to talk about it, I feel like it's ridiculous. Like that little edge that they always feel like they have to get everywhere. Let's just play the game. Just play the game. And so this new initiative will hopefully help that. Now, listen, I'm a Patriots fan. I've lived with Bill Belichick for a long, long time. I know that there's a level of dishonesty that even at this point will go into this, where they're not going to be completely truthful about this too. But hey, baby steps. Hopefully that'll help. Now, in our final segment, this is just a thought exercise. There was one team from the AAC or what it's called the AC now, that is trying to get into a Power 4 conference. They got rejected by one, but would the ACC take them? It might be something worth thinking about. I'll get into that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. If you are a first listener, if you listen to Locked On BC first every morning, man, thank you so much. I want to shout out my first listeners. I know there's a bunch of you. When I premiere this and I see a bunch of you sitting in that lobby watching and listening to Locked On BC on YouTube, thank you so much. And if you need a second listen, check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs, JJ Jackson, and Alex Dono are at ACC Media Days. I couldn't make it. They're down there. They're closer. It's a little easier. Talking about the ACC football, check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Now, wrapping things up, another college football news item from the week was that Memphis offered $200 million plus. I've actually heard up to $250 million to the Big 12 to join. They are basically trying to do what SMU did with the ACC last year. Big 12, shut them down. Said no. And I thought this was interesting because Memphis is not a bad athletic program. You know, their basketball teams had their moments. Their football teams had their moments. So I thought maybe the Big 12 might actually consider it, but now that they're not, would this team make sense for the ACC? Now, from an academic standpoint, from an academic profile, no, they don't. Memphis is not the same as bringing in SMU, Stanford, and Cal. They don't match there. I get that. But adding $200 million and whatever TV money they bring in, obviously could help again bridge that gap. Like, we continue to talk about getting to 2035, was it 2035, the grant of rights ends for ESPN. You need to just bridge that any way you can. So adding a Memphis for, 10 years may not be the worst thing, especially if 5 of it they're just paying you. And it's good money because $200 plus whatever the media deal is. Could that make sense? You don't have any you don't have an imprint in Tennessee. Like, there's Vanderbilt, there's other programs, Tennessee obviously, in that area, but the ACC doesn't have that. Could that make sense? It could. But I look at this as a purely money move. They would not be a detrimental addition to your conference. They're local, so you're not really having most of the teams that were complaining about Stanford, SMU, and Cal don't have to travel. Like, they're right within their wheelhouse. That gets rid of all that. And, they would be good I would think they would be pretty good when it comes to television ratings and things like that. They're not a bad team. So I would think the ACC might consider this. And it also, for one reason, gets rid of the odd conference teams that you have, which, as Jim Phillips said on Tuesday, is just a weird thing when it comes to scheduling teams. So I would honestly consider this. I think the ACC would be pretty wise if they thought, maybe we should bring in Memphis, take all that money, and then again spread it out. You could make it again and take all that money and make it more into the success initiatives or the eyeball, the exposure initiative, whatever that is. This Memphis team could help. Now, there's been no talk about Memphis showing interest in joining the ACC, but they clearly are showing that they're interested in getting into the Power Four. Now, another conference that could be, poking around could be the Pac-12. They really could use whatever solid programs could add to it. And I bet you they would add them without having, Memphis pay all that money. But I think they also could fit in the ACC. I really do think, other than from an academic standard profile. But look, folks, let's get off the high horse with that kind of stuff. Is that what college football is about right now? It's not about academics. That's obviously important at a school like BC. But when you're making business decisions, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. So I would think Memphis might be a good choice. Now, on tomorrow's show, we have much more to talk about. We have even more things to bring up from what Jim Phillips and ACC Media Days coming up. I'm sure we'll have much more that comes out in the next 24 hours. So check out all of that on Locked On Boston College. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. You can check me out on Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're available wherever you find all that. Just look up AJ Black, Locked On BC, or Eagle Insider. I'm available on all of those. Just pick the one you like, or all of them it does help our exposure. So I do appreciate all of you who do follow us. Thank you all, and we'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.